Sounds good.
Welcome everyone to this evening's program, Understanding Hospice and Palliative Care Series. Tonight's program is the first of four within this series, Advanced Healthcare Planning. Our next series will be next Tuesday, so Serious Illness Support, starting at the same time. And our last two series will be in person at the Evanston Public Library, March 20th, Coping with Grief and Loss. And the last of the series will be Navigating Caregiver Stress. And that will also be in person at the Evanston Public Library. So please take a look at our website and register for the other three series if you haven't already. Our guest speaker is Maureen Burns. She's a Senior Community Education Associate and Research Liaison at the HAP Foundation. And I'll let her further introduce herself.
Thank you so much. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen. I'm so excited to be here this evening with all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that clearly. So yes, as mentioned, this is part one of a four-part series. And tonight we're going to be discussing advanced care planning and advanced directives. So as mentioned, my name is Maureen Burns. I use she, her pronouns, or ella in Spanish. And I'm a community health worker with the HAP Foundation. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's not always easy to think about ourselves or someone that we care about being sick or being unable to make medical decisions. That can actually be very scary and very uncomfortable. And as we will see, sometimes this fear or this worry or this discomfort dissuades people from having these important conversations and from planning ahead. So as we're going to see during the presentation, this process of planning can really prevent a lot of difficult situations. So I just want to encourage you all to give yourselves like a round of applause for being brave enough to engage in these conversations and learn more. So as I mentioned, I'm a community health worker with the HAP Foundation. I live and work in Rogers Park, and most of my community education is focused on Rogers Park and surrounding communities, such as Evanston. I do a lot of work in Evanston. And a large part of my job is discussing issues and topics that relate to serious illness and end of life. So I work for the HAP Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization. We are not direct care providers, but rather we focus on serious illness through education, both community and clinical, also through advocacy, research, and workforce development. So our mission is really to expand awareness of and access to quality serious illness support. For any of you who may not be familiar with the term community health worker or CHW, which is what I am, we're really frontline public health workers, and we aim to act as a bridge between members of the community, so just regular folks like yourself, and healthcare entities or social service entities. So this is really a trusting relationship, and we do a lot of health education like I'm doing tonight. Specifically within the HAP Foundation, because we're focused on serious illness support, my role is to work to eliminate barriers to care, to provide education that is not only informative, but that is respectful of people's culture, religion, and lived experiences. And then additionally, I do a little bit of resource navigation. So if you ever need help finding some resource in the community, whether it's a support group or a care provider or a food pantry. We have like a portal that we use for that. So I'll share my contact information because I can also help connect you to resources. So in terms of tonight's presentation, our objectives, we're going to start thinking about what's important to us. So really asking that question, what do you value in your life right now? And what might matter to you if you were to become ill? We're also going to talk about why advanced care planning is important and how it can be empowering. We're going to discuss several different options for the actual document, a legally binding advance directive. So that you'll have plenty of resources and options should you choose to complete one. And we're also going to discuss how, making our wishes known or helping a loved one make their wishes known can help us avoid a lot of difficult situations, because unfortunately, when people wait too long, it's never easy to have these conversations, but it's even harder when you're in like a crisis situation. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. So just to jump right in, what is advanced care planning? Really, it's the process of deciding how you would want to be cared for if you were unable to speak for yourself. And an advance directive is the actual legal document in which you state your future healthcare wishes. It's important to note that advance directives are not used to provide less aggressive care or to take away options. So I always like to let people know, even if you fill out a document, as long as you are able to communicate and you are lucid, you will continue to make your own healthcare decisions. That document is there just in case if something were to occur and you were not able to communicate, that you already have all these wishes spelled out so that there's clarity, and make sure that you can continue to receive the care that you want under any circumstances, even when you may not be able to speak for yourself. So who should have an advance directive? Unfortunately, a lot of people tend to think of advance directives as for senior citizens or the elders in our community. But really, the answer to this question is everyone. All adults 18 years and older should have an advance directive. And the reason for this is we just never know what's going to happen in our lives. We're all currently living through a worldwide pandemic. You just never know what's going to happen, right? And no one really ever expects to get sick or expects to be incapacitated. So while it is important for seniors, we argue that it's important for all adults. Having said that, our age and our health status can definitely affect our focus and our goals when we fill out advance directives. And so what I mean by that is that advanced care planning can change over time. For a young person, it might be more of a what if situation. What if I have an accident or an unexpected diagnosis? That is why they might, fill out an advance directive. For people who are chronically ill, it might be more of a what next. So like, I have this chronic condition. I need to be aware of how it could progress, what treatment options are out there. And then obviously for people who are getting older or for people who are seriously ill, it becomes a little bit more urgent. It becomes more of a what now? Am I going to want aggressive treatments or am I going to want to focus on comfort care? So as you can see on this slide, it does change over time. And most of what we will be discussing tonight when we talk about advanced directives is a document that includes naming someone to be a healthcare decision maker, also known as healthcare power of attorney, and then leaving that person explicit directions. Some of you may also have heard of POLST, which is what used to be called DNR, or Do Not Resuscitate Order. It's now called Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, or POLST. That is similar to an advance directive, but that form is only for people who are seriously ill. That is like a medical order rather than an advance directive. So while it's similar, it's not needed for most people. Most people start with just an advance directive form, which is what we will talk about tonight. Also important to note that everything we are talking about tonight has to do with healthcare decisions and healthcare wishes. So keep in mind, many times people approach this and they're also thinking about planning ahead for their finances, which is a great idea, to have a will or an estate plan, but that is completely separate from a healthcare advance directive, which is what we will be talking about tonight. So according to data from Vermont Ethics Network survey, 90% of people surveyed say that talking with their loved ones about end-of-life care is important, but only 27% had actually had that conversation. Also, 82% said it's important to put their healthcare wishes in writing, but only 23% had actually put their wishes in writing. So people have a tendency to not complete advance directives, even when they recognize the importance of advance directives. So why is that? There's several reasons. One is lack of access. People often don't understand what documents they need. They might mistakenly believe that they have to have a lawyer, or they have to have a lot of money, or a notary. So people often don't know how to start the process, which is why sessions like tonight are important. Another big reason is discomfort. As I mentioned earlier, people sometimes worry that by making plans, they are tempting fate or asking for something bad to happen to them. I always tell people that they should think of their advance directive like car insurance, right? I just recently bought a new car and I went out and got insurance on it. That does not mean that I'm asking to have a car wreck, right? It means that I'm acknowledging that unexpected things happen. I'm putting plans in place just in case. Another reason could be fear and mistrust. So sometimes people, especially people who have had prior bad experiences, either with their family or with the healthcare system or with different bureaucracies, they might fear that by writing down what they want and selecting someone to speak for them, that somehow they're giving up power. And actually the opposite is true. As I said before, as long as you are lucid and able to communicate, you will continue to communicate and make your own decisions. This document will only be used if and when you are unable to communicate. And then the final reason that I think people don't fill out advance directives is procrastination, right? Even if you think it's important, we're busy out here living our lives, right? We're trying to work, take care of our families, pay our bills. So it's easy for something like this to kind of drop to the bottom of our list. So I think most people joining us are probably living in Illinois. What happens in the state of Illinois if you don't have an advance directive and you're unable to speak for yourself? What happens? Who would make your decisions in that case? And basically the state uses this list. So if someone is ill and unable to communicate and they do not have an advance directive, the state will follow this list. So they'll start with like a surrogate or a legally assigned guardian of the person, which most people don't have. Then they will move to a spouse or civil partner. If that doesn't exist, they will move to adult children, living parents, adult siblings, grandparents or grandchildren, close friend, And then at the very bottom of the list, if they're unable to find anyone, then they actually appoint a stranger. So a bureaucrat from the state of Illinois would be appointed to make that person's healthcare decisions. It's also important to note that while they're trying to locate all these people, in the meantime, they will do the most, right? Until they have a decision maker or a decision, they will do the most aggressive, life-sustaining, life support treatments until they find that person. So obviously we can see that this is not ideal, right? If anyone has to make decisions for us, it should be those that love us, that know us, that care about us. It should not be a stranger. Also, depending on people's situations, you could see how this could be problematic. You know, what if someone is separated from their spouse? Or what if they have several adult children who have very different views about what should be done? So this just really illustrates why it is a good idea to complete an advance directive and decide ahead of time who would make your healthcare decisions. So I want to pause here and just ask people to think about, for those of you who are here with us, if you've ever been involved in a situation like this, where someone you knew had an accident or a medical situation and was incapacitated. It is not, you know, you don't have to share, but if anyone would like to share, whether in the chat or out loud, if this has ever happened, you know, what happened, who made the decision, was the family in agreement, was there any stress? I always like to kind of open it up first and see if anyone has prior experiences that kind of led them here tonight.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to share.
And if no one does, that's also okay. You can also feel free to just sort of reflect to yourself. So I'm going to go through a couple example scenarios. The first one is Paula. So Paula recently got married to Lou. She has 3 adult children from her previous marriage, and the children are very close to their mom. The children do not have a good relationship with Lou. So Paula has a heart attack and is rushed to the hospital. Lou and Paula's adult children have very different opinions on what Paula would want. So what happens in this situation if Paula does not have an advance directive? Lou, as her spouse, as her husband, would have the sole authority to make all of her healthcare decisions. Her 3 adult children, you know, despite being her closest blood relatives, would not have any legal authority to make any healthcare decisions. That would all be on Lou. Another example scenario, for those of us with children, I have a daughter who just turned 18. So let's say your 18-year-old child is in a car accident. You receive a call from a friend who was in the car with them, and the friend said that they hit their head, but don't know anything else. And so you call the hospital to get more information. In this situation, it's important to note that once someone is 18, even if they've just turned 18, they are a legal adult. Even if they're on your health insurance plan, hospitals oftentimes are not supposed to divulge any information without that person's consent. It's part of the HIPAA law. So in this situation, if no immediate medical care is required, they will wait to get permission from your child before they can share any information with you. If medical care is required and the child is unable to speak, then they will reach out to you as the parents. But it's important to note that if you are identified as your child's healthcare power of attorney, which is what we would do in an advance directive, then you will be able to receive updates right away, regardless of the situation. So this is just another example of a situation that many people don't think about. But this is why it's important to have these legal documents in an emergency situation. So one more here, Carlos, a 50-year-old man who has never been married. He has a massive stroke and is placed on a ventilator. He can't speak, and the doctors do not think he will recover. Carlos has two sisters, Maria and Jasenia. Maria is the oldest, has not spoken to Carlos in many years, but has strong religious beliefs and wants everything to be done to keep Carlos alive. On the other hand, we have Yesenia, who's very close to Carlos, and she doesn't think that this is a good quality of life, and she wants to discontinue the ventilator. So in this situation, a lot of people think that Maria, as the oldest, would make the decision in the absence of an advance directive. But actually in Illinois, the law is that if it's adult siblings, there needs to be what they call a consensus. So what that means is a majority. If there's 3 siblings, 2 need to agree. In this case, there's only 2 siblings. So they need to come to an agreement about what to do. If they're unable to come to an agreement, or if it takes them a long time, in the meantime, Carlos would be kept alive on the ventilator while his 2 sisters are trying to come to an agreement. And sadly, sometimes these things do escalate and go all the way into court, into the legal system, when family members cannot agree. So these are all examples of what would happen if someone does not have an advance directive. They're meant to illustrate how advance directives give you power to name your decision maker and to provide some clarity, to not have all this gray area. So that's one of the reasons why advanced care planning is important. It's also more important because we're living longer overall, right? We have a lot of advanced medical technology. And because of that, we can extend life longer than we ever have been able to before. And that's a good thing, but it also can bring up some ethical and moral dilemmas when we talk about extending life and quality of life. I want everyone to keep in mind throughout this presentation that I don't advocate for any right or wrong answers, right? If someone wants all the most aggressive treatments, they should get that. If someone does not want those aggressive treatments, then they should not have them. I really advocate for people to have a choice. There's no right or wrong answer. But this is why it is really important to think about this stuff. Also, I hear time and time again from people in the community, when people don't fill out these documents and when a crisis happens, it can really create a lot of tension within families, with people disagreeing or with people having to make judgment calls because no one left them instructions. And so that is why we advocate for people to talk about this stuff before a crisis. Take steps now while you're, healthy or relatively healthy, to be prepared. It's really hard to expect people that love us to make decisions when we haven't made those decisions ourselves and we haven't articulated them. So if we don't know what we want, how can we ask others to make those tough decisions for us? And I think it's important to note that if anyone has ever been in one of these situations where, maybe you had to choose between continuing life support or pulling the plug, as they call it, that's a really hard decision to make, right? And we step up for the people that we love and we make judgment calls. But sometimes people can really be racked by guilt, even years later. They're still wondering if they did the right thing. So that's another reason why we encourage people to do this, is it actually makes it easier on your loved ones if you can leave them clear directions. So Now let's talk about actually engaging in the process of filling out an advance directive. After you sort of engage in the initial thinking about what you value now and what you might want in the future, you need to start thinking about how to put it in a written document, a legally binding document. So you want to think about what makes you happy now, what brings you joy, and what values are important to you. Also important to consider if you have cultural traditions or religious traditions that play a role in your life. Also start to think about, are there any medical situations that scare you? Do you have any health issues currently? And how are you managing those? And then also really important to think about if you've had past experiences, if you've seen a loved one or someone you care about die in a way that you would not want for yourself. So as we consider what might matter to us if we were seriously ill and what might matter to us if we were dying, just take a moment to reflect on that. Some of us may have thought about this a lot, and for other people, it might be their first time even thinking about what would matter to them if they were really sick or if they were at the end of their lives. It's definitely going to be different, probably for each of us in this room, and that's as it should be, right? We're all unique individuals. But these are some common concerns, right? They don't apply to everyone, but these are things that I hear time and time again from people. The first is comfort and pain management. Many people will communicate that they don't want to be in pain, right? They don't want to suffer. They want to be kept comfortable. Conversely, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes people believe that pain is a process, and they're okay with that, and they want to go through it, without having painkillers. Another big common concern is honoring religious rituals or even just a sense of peace, spirituality. Receiving or declining treatment, right? So what I've been talking about, getting the treatment you want or being able to pass up treatment that you don't agree with. Lessening the burden on loved ones. We've also touched on that, alleviating, making it easier for the people that care about you. We all know, right, that if we are seriously ill, that's going to be a tough time on our loved ones emotionally, right? That's going to be hard on them already. So kind of lessening the burden by planning ahead and not having them have to sacrifice too much for us. And then finally, another big one is location. When it comes to end of life, many people communicate that they would like to die at home or somewhere they feel comfortable rather than in a hospital or an assisted living or a nursing home. So those are just some of the big concerns that matter to people, but you might have your own unique concerns that I haven't talked about. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about common concerns and thinking about what matters to you, now you want to start to consider, would you want treatments to prolong your life if you are unconscious or if you couldn't communicate? Or would you prefer only treatments that make you comfortable? Again, I want to stress that there's no right or wrong answers. But you want to think about what matters to you. Is it about extending your life? Is it about maximizing your quality of life, or some combination? Is the goal to stay alive no matter what? Or is the goal to reduce suffering? So these are just some questions to kind of get you in the frame of mind of what you need to be considering. And past experiences play a big role. If you watch someone that you care about go into a coma, and that person existed in a coma for years, they couldn't communicate, and you watch that kind of go down, you may not want that for yourself, right? But the other side of that is if you knew someone, they fell into a coma and they made a miraculous recovery and they woke up from the coma and they were fine, then you might want life support. You might want to remain in a coma waiting for that miracle. So it really can be influenced by what we've been through, what we've seen, and also what we value. So thinking about what quality of life looks like for you as an individual. What is acceptable to you? Is independence important to you? Is being able to communicate important to you? Location, would you be okay existing in a hospital or an assisted living? Would you rather be at home? And then thinking about, would the burdens of life ever outweigh the benefits? Again, these are heavy questions. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. I'm speaking about them, fairly openly, but I want to acknowledge that these are not 5-minute conversations, right? And it's okay if you don't have the answers to these questions, but you want to start thinking about them now, before you actually put pen to paper and put your wishes in writing. Now, in terms of an actual legally binding advance directive, there are several options. So first of all, as I mentioned, I work for the HAP Foundation, and right now we have our own advance directive document. So it has the legally binding portion, and then it also has a conversation guide. That's kind of what we've been talking about thus far, questions to ask yourself, things to consider, and tips for having the conversation with loved ones. So by being here today, you're all entitled to a free copy of our document if you would like it. So I'll also put my email address in the chat, but you would just email me and I can send you a PDF of that form. Also, the state of Illinois has a free healthcare power of attorney form. So that's another option for your advance directive. I'll also be sharing these slides. So the links that you see here, you'll be able, to have those and click on them and kind of explore the different options. My Living Voice is another website that offers a free advance directive. And then finally, 5 Wishes. 5 Wishes is a pretty popular document. It's not free, but it's low cost, costs about $5 for one copy. And what's nice about the 5 Wishes is that it is available in about 30 languages bilingually. So that would be a really good option, especially if you need the document in a language other than English. So there are many different options, but what all these options are going to have in common is they're going to have a place where you name a decision maker, and then they're going to have a place where you indicate whether you want aggressive life-sustaining treatments or not. Other than that, they vary. The document that we've created at the HAP Foundation and the 5 Wishes, both of those documents include places to talk about things that are maybe not the nitty-gritty healthcare, to talk more holistically about your care. But the Illinois Healthcare Power of Attorney form is really just decision maker and then instructions. It doesn't really have that holistic or whole person part of it. So really encourage you to check out all of these and select the one that you feel the most comfortable with. So regardless of the document that you use, you're going to have to select a healthcare agent. So this person goes by many names. Some documents call them a healthcare agent. Others call them a healthcare decision maker or a healthcare power of attorney. It's all the same person. And basically, this is the person that you are designating to make your decisions if you're unable to make them yourself. So legally, this person must be an adult. They have to be 18 or older. It's also important that they are willing and capable of taking on this responsibility, right? Because they are going to have to carry out your wishes. It doesn't mean that they have to agree with your wishes, but they have to respect them enough that they're going to carry out your wishes and do what you have written in your advance directive. So it's really important that you trust this person. It's also important that they are able to advocate on your behalf, that they're not going to kind of fold maybe from pressure from other people or from doctors or other family members who don't agree with your wishes. So when you're thinking about who this person will be, it's so important that you communicate with this person, right? It should not be a secret. They need to know that you are selecting them. They need to understand why, understand, what's going to be expected of them in an emergency situation and be okay with that. Also important to note that while only one person can act as your healthcare agent at a time, you are allowed to select a backup. And we really recommend that you do this. So basically, in the advance directive, you would have like your first choice and your second choice. The reason why this is a good idea is, again, life is unpredictable. What if you fill out the document today and you don't have an occasion to use it for 20 years? And when you go to use it, the person that you selected, what if they've passed away? Or what if they can't be reached? Another reason why we recommend a second choice or backup is because many people tend to name their spouse, which is great, but we spend a lot of time with our spouse. So like, what if you and your spouse are both in a car accident? You're both incapacitated. So we really do recommend that you have a first choice and a second choice. And you can list, in our document from the HAP Foundation, there's a spot to list first choice and second choice. That also exists in the 5 wishes. The other documents I would have to look at and double check if they have that option. So once you think about who that person would be, that trusted decision maker, and you name them, now you want to make it easier for that person. You want to leave them directions about what you want them to do on your behalf. Again, I want to stress that there's no right or wrong answers when it comes to selecting treatment options. It's a very individual choice. Also important to note that if you change your mind, that's okay. You would just need to complete a new advance directive, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. Also, I just want to take a moment to recognize that if anyone on the call has Medicare, Medicare now covers advanced care planning discussions with your physicians. You can make an appointment with your doctor to talk about advanced directives, talk about questions that you might have, and that visit will be covered by Medicare. Also want to take a moment to just address the fact that when it comes to talking to physicians or other healthcare providers about advanced care planning, their reactions can vary, right? I think we have to keep in mind that all the discomfort and stigma that exists for us when we think about advanced care planning, sometimes it also exists for healthcare professionals. They are people too, after all. And so some physicians do a great job of having these conversations with their patients, and others do not bring it up, unless the patient brings it up. And we're working on that, to change that. We really believe that everyone in healthcare should have an understanding of the importance of advanced directives and have a certain comfort level, to have these discussions. But for some of these, medical professionals, they also might be nervous to start a discussion with a patient because they might worry about how the patient is going to react. So just keep that in mind. But as you engage in this process, and once you fill out an advance directive, a big part of that is you're also going to want to communicate that to your doctor and your healthcare team. Because one, you want to have a document, but then people need to know that you have the document. So in this section, when you are selecting treatment options, what is going to come up is what we call life-sustaining treatments, also known as life support. So this can include things like tube feedings or fluids through a tube, breathing machines, CPR. These are all considered life-sustaining treatments. Keep in mind, if you have mixed feelings about what you want, all the more reason to talk to your loved ones and talk to your doctor so that you can be well informed and have guidance. So the form that we use at the HAP Foundation, similar to most other advanced directives, asks you to pick whether life-sustaining treatments are the most important thing or whether comfort and quality of life is more important. So it's kind of like a yes, I want life support, or no, I don't. And then we have additional questions about different scenarios for clarity. Because sometimes the answer can be a little bit more complicated, right? It's impossible to plan for every single scenario, but I have seen people where it's like, well, in this case, maybe I want life-sustaining treatments, but if X, Y, or Z happens, maybe I don't want them. So I think what's important to recognize in this is, yes, you want to make a selection about what you want, but more than anything, it goes back to that person that you've designated as your healthcare power of attorney. You want to give that person guidance, but at the end of the day, if there's any gray area or uncertainty, you want to have selected someone that you really trust to make that decision if they have to. Now, aside from naming that healthcare power of attorney and then leaving them some guidance about life-sustaining treatments, our document also includes what we call some additional guidance. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of more broadly what matters to you as a person. Because we know, even though we're talking about healthcare, we're people, right? We're more than just patients who get diseases, right? We're people with likes and dislikes and values. So in this section of our conversation guide, and this also exists pretty similar in the 5 wishes, is where we really talk about other additional things that we might want if we are seriously ill. So things like who should be with you? Who do you want to be surrounded by? Soothing activities, whether that is a warm bath or a massage or listening to a certain type of music. This would also be a place where you could talk about any religious, spiritual, or cultural rituals that would be important to you if you are at the end of your life. Also thinking about what if you actually do pass away. So if you were to die, if there's things that you want your loved ones to know in terms of, if you want a memorial service or if you want to be buried or cremated, if you want to have organs donated, it's really up to you how much detail you put into here. I have seen people in this section, leave a message to the loved ones that says, look in the top drawer of my dresser. And then, after the person dies, the family goes to that dresser drawer and they find that there's a letter to each of them, that the person had written, like a goodbye letter. So people really, can go very in depth with it. It's important to note that we have this section in our document. It also exists in the 5 wishes, but this part of the document is not legally enforceable. What I mean by that, is if I put in this section that I like warm baths and I would like to have warm baths, they can't, go to court and force someone to give me a warm bath. It's not quite the same thing as when it comes to the legalities of medical treatments. But still, many people find this to be beneficial, to think about this stuff and to put in writing for their loved ones. Oftentimes, we don't always think about this stuff until it happens. My father passed away in 2021, and he was ill for a very long time. And when I started to sit down with him and encourage him to complete an advance directive, he didn't really want to do it. He didn't really think it was necessary. He was married to my mom. He's like, your mother's going to make my decisions. I don't need to do this. But once we engaged in the conversation, it was only through that conversation that I found out what he wanted in terms of his homegoing, right? He had already told us that he wanted to be cremated, but it wasn't until we were filling out this document that he let me know where he wanted us to spread his ashes. So sometimes having these conversations can really help you find out things that you just wouldn't think about if you didn't have the conversation. And these can be very important things. So I do hope that after tonight's presentation, many of you will start thinking about this stuff, and maybe you will decide to complete an advance directive. So if you do, some important things to note. You're going to want to sign the document, and you're going to need a witness. We'll talk a little bit about the witness in a moment. The witness will also need to sign the form. Here in the state of Illinois, you do not have to get a lawyer. You don't have to get the form notarized. You just need to sign it and a witness. It's important that the person that you are selecting as your healthcare power of attorney either has a copy of the form or knows where you are storing it and is able to access it. You also want to make sure that your healthcare team is aware of your advance directive and how to access it. Also, really encourage you to share what's in your advance directive with anyone who cares about you. So maybe you have a large family and you're selecting obviously just one person to be your healthcare power of attorney. Tell the rest of your family as well, just so that everyone is on the same page and there's less surprises. Now, in terms of a witness, you are going to fill out this form, and because it is a legal document, you need an adult witness to sign it. And this person is basically signing to say, this is legitimate. No one coerced you into doing this. These are your own wishes. So the witness needs to be an 18 years or up, an adult, and it should not be a family member. The witness should not be the person that you are selecting as your healthcare agent. That's a conflict of interest. And it also should not be a medical provider or practitioner, because that could also be a conflict of interest. So really, usually the easiest person to use as your witness would be a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, or someone that you know in your community, whether it's from a faith community or someone from the library, someone who's kind of impartial to be this outside witness. Just because, even though this document is pretty easy to fill out, it is a legal document, and we want to make sure that it is valid and will stand up, in court should it be challenged. As I said, it's really important that you share your advance directives with everyone who cares about you. So as I said, oftentimes in families, there can be tension, disagreements, or drama, right? That can exist in many of our families. So we really advise that if you are selecting, someone as your healthcare agent, sit down the rest of your family and make sure they know. Maybe you have 4 children and you've selected one of those children to be your decision maker. Sit down all 4 children and let them know, I filled out this document. This is why I think it's important. This is what's in the document. This is the person who will be making the decisions for me if I can't make them for myself. But I want all of you to know, because you're all important to me. So I want to share this with you. And it's a really good time to have any conversations or disagreements that might come up. Because then if you do become ill, it's not a surprise to anyone. People are already aware of what your plans are. We also, as I said, encourage you to share this information with your doctor or your healthcare team. Depending on who your doctor is, they will have different procedures for an advance directive. Sometimes you go to the doctor and you let them know that you've completed this document, and they will just make a note in your chart that you have an advance directive, and they'll record the name and contact information for the person that you selected as a healthcare agent. Other doctors, depending on the provider, they might ask you to actually bring the document in, and they can scan the whole thing into your electronic medical record so that they have all that information stored in the computer. So it varies, across different providers, but you need to bring it up to your doctor and let them know that you have this document. Now, it's also possible, as I referenced before, that you might fill out a document and then something might change. In fact, we advocate for people to do these documents when they're healthy. So many times things do change because, life happens. So we really advocate for people to update their document over time using what we call the 5 Ds. So the first D is decade. What that means is every 10 years, you should pull out your document, review it, and make sure that it is still accurate. It's still what you want, just because 10 years is a long time. The second D is divorce, just because a lot of people tend to name their spouse as that healthcare agent, and then they get divorced, and that might change things. So if you have a divorce, that's a good time to review your document. The third D is diagnosis, meaning you are diagnosed with a new condition, because sometimes what we want when we're healthy changes, when we're diagnosed with some medical condition. So if you do receive a diagnosis, that's a good time to review your document. The fourth D is deterioration. What that means is that you already have a condition, but it escalates and it gets worse. So maybe you've been living with heart problems, you've had them, under control, you've been managing it well, but then something happens, and your condition gets worse. That is a good time. That is a signal to review your document and make sure everything is still true for you. And then the fifth D is death, meaning the death of someone that you care about. As we talked about, the things we see, the things we experience with others can impact what we want for ourselves. So if you watch someone pass away, that is a good time and a good reminder to review your own document. Now, when it comes to changes, let's say you're using the 5 Ds and you look at your document and you're like, oh, you know what? Something has changed. What do you do? My advice, because these documents are either free or very low cost, my advice is to destroy the old document, shred it, and do a brand new one. And the reason why that's my advice is because we want to avoid a situation where you have multiple documents floating around with different things in them. So what you're going to want to do, if you decide to make a change, is you're going to want to not only destroy that old document and have a new one, but you're going to want to let your healthcare power of attorney know, your decision maker, your loved ones, and your doctor. You need to let them all know that you have this updated document. Because really the worst thing that could happen is for someone to have 2 different advance directives with different dates and different information in them, because that really defeats the whole purpose. The purpose of this is to have clarity, and that just causes confusion. Also, it's important to make sure that you're storing your document in a place that, yes, is safe and secure, but that is accessible. Sometimes people have a tendency to want to lock this document up, like in a safe deposit box. That's not a good idea. The reason why is you want people to be able to access the document in an emergency. So if God forbid, something happened to me, I was in a car accident and I had this document in a safe deposit box, it could take my loved ones days or even weeks to gain access to that safe deposit box. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to lock it up. You want to have it somewhere where people know. So wherever that is, whether it's, in your desk drawer, on your kitchen counter, make sure that your healthcare decision maker either has a copy or knows where the document is and has access to it in an emergency. And as I said previously, the more people know, the better. You want to make sure your doctor knows as well. Because sadly, what does happen sometimes is people fill out advance directives, but then they don't tell people. And people don't know about the advance directive, so they don't know it exists. That's really a tragedy, right? We wouldn't want someone to take the time to outline their wishes and then have their wishes not be followed simply because people don't know the document exists. They don't know where to access it. So that's another really important piece of this. Also, I want to talk just a little bit about if you are someone's healthcare power of attorney. So if someone names you to be their decision maker, that's a big responsibility. So all the things I just talked about, the same is true when roles are reversed. So you want to make sure you know where that document is. Either you have a copy or you know how to access it. And you want to make sure you talk with that person and make sure that you really understand what it is that they want and what is expected of you, because it is a very big responsibility. And we want to make sure that we are honoring people's wishes. So I do want to just acknowledge, that these are tough conversations, and they're not always easy to have. Death and illness are hard topics. So we acknowledge that it's not easy to talk about this stuff. I just spent sort of the last hour talking about why I think it's important. But obviously these are personal decisions. I also encourage people to understand that, if you came to this workshop tonight and you think this is important and you're ready to start this process, that's wonderful and that's great. But just keep in mind that when you go and approach your friends or your loved ones or your family, they might not be as ready for the conversation as you are. So just acknowledging that not everyone is in the same place. Many times when I do these presentations, I get adults, younger adults saying, I'm trying to convince my mother or my father to have an advance directive. They're getting older and they don't want to do it. That's a common experience, right? I reference that with my own father, how he didn't really think it was important. So people get frustrated. I understand that. I also, though, will encourage people to always practice what you preach. If you are going to ask your spouse or your parent to complete this document, you should also be ready to complete a document for yourself. Because as we talked about, life is unpredictable, right? And a 70-year-old should have this, but so should a 30-year-old or a 20-year-old. So sometimes it is easier to get people on board and kind of do this as a family activity. If you're close with your family and you are going to be naming a blood relative as your healthcare agent, do it together, engage in these conversations together. Also, it's important to note that I think this process is important for everyone, but if you know that you have a specific situation that could make it more important, for instance, maybe you are estranged from your blood relatives and you are naming a friend, a chosen family as your healthcare agent. It's important to note that in that situation, it's even more important, right? Because in the absence of a document, they usually go to blood relatives. So just kind of being aware of your own unique situation when you engage in this process. As I said a couple of times, this is a process. It's not a 5-minute discussion. But the first step is really being able to start talking and thinking about these things. So I encourage people to view it as that, a process. Take a few days or even a few weeks to consider some of the questions that we talked about. What matters to you right now? What makes you happy right now? Are there any situations, health situations that scare you? Kind of go through that whole process before you just jump to, yes, I want life support, or no, I don't, because these are, complex. It's a complex question about what you want if you're seriously ill. But always, always encourage communication. It's so key to tell all the people in your life that care about you what's going on and kind of get everyone on the same page. As I said, I'm going to share these slides after the presentation, but here are some more resources. As I said, you can email me to get access to the HAP Foundation Advance Directive, which has been reviewed by lawyers and is legally binding. I've also listed here the website, IDPH, for the state of Illinois' healthcare power of attorney document, which is also free. I talked a little bit about the 5 wishes. So I've listed their website as well. Their document is $5 and it's available as a paper booklet and as a electronically stored PDF. Also including the post form and some other websites, My Living Voice and A Personal Decision. There's really a lot of resources now on the internet to not only educate you about advanced directives, but to really give you strategies and tips for having these conversations with the people that you love. So I definitely encourage you all to explore those resources. And finally, thank you. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for being here. I hope that I'll see some of you again in the next workshops that are part of this series. I've also listed on this slide my email and my phone number. If you have questions, whether now or down the road, we covered a lot of information. So if questions come up in the future, feel free to email me and I'll always do my best to help you. I won't tell you what to put in your advance directive because that's your decision, but I'm happy to kind of answer logistical questions when they come up. And then finally, I have here a link to a brief anonymous survey. I put that link in the chat. You can also access it by pointing your cell phone at this QR code that's on the screen. I ask you to take a couple minutes, it's less than 5 minutes to fill out the survey. It really, really helps us at the HAP Foundation to improve these presentations and kind of see how we're doing. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to open it up for questions, comments, or if anyone wants to share anything. So I'm going to take a look in the chat.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any questions. Or type in the chat box.
And thank you for the people in the chat saying thank you. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening.
Again, please click on the survey. I will also provide it in an email to all that registered. And I can also send your slides, Maureen, to
Yes,
each
definitely.
person that registered. If you send them to me, I can just send it to everyone with the survey link if they don't access it tonight.
Yeah, that'll be
I
great.
also want to, okay. I also want to mention, don't forget about next week's presentation, Serious Illness Support is part 2 of the series. Same time next week, Tuesday, March 14th from 6 to 7. If you haven't registered, already, please do on our EPO website.
Yes, and when we come together for that next session, serious illness support, I'm going to be talking a lot about hospice and palliative care. So if you are interested in sort of, we talked tonight about aggressive measures versus comfort-based care. I'm going to be talking a lot about what that comfort-based care can look like and kind of who offers it, who pays for it. So definitely hope that you can join us for that session.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Maureen, and I'll see you and everyone else next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.